I was the head golf professional at Hazeltine National from the end of 2012 to the end of 2021. And that was a great chapter of my life.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are in season 2, episode 7 of the Restoration Club podcast. We're really excited. It's been a lot going on here, technically an off season in golf, but never an off season in life. So we're really excited about tonight in particular, having Chandler Withington with us tonight. An absolute blast. Had a chance to meet Chandler at the U.S. Open this year in Pinehurst. Have a little, I don't know how to do pointing. If you're on the live on the thing right here, got a little artwork in the back that I picked up from him, and had a little inscription there to my boys that I'm really proud of and have been sharing it with them. And they have no idea 4 and 3 what that means yet, but the places they will go will matter. And I'm excited about how golf's going to be a part of that. So Chandler, thanks for being with us today on the podcast. And, we have those questions and we've already prepped a little bit for this conversation, but is there a way that you could package like who is Chandler so that everybody can kind of get to know you in a moment?
Yeah, let me try. Well, first off, thanks for having me on. I'm big fans of what you guys are doing. This aligns with who I am and who I'm trying to be and where I'm trying to go. So looking forward to this conversation. How do I package who I am? This feels like speed dating, right? Yeah. I think in its simplest form, let's start with one, I'm a sinner saved by a savior. So let's start with that. That's what I think my identity is. I was talking about this recently with somebody. It's I've gone through this phase of my life for the last 3 years where I've really had a tough time answering that question of like, who am I? What do you do is the common question. Tell us like what you do. I'm like, I don't really know what I do. I doodle a little bit. Yeah, the artwork's part of it. I've spent a life in golf, I think since about the age of 14, when I was introduced to it. Went through the ranks from bag room to caddy, to picking the range, washing the carts to assistant professional, all the way to head golf professional. And it made kind of a right turn in my life 3 years ago, to focus on being a husband and father. I was having a tough time really being all of those hats at once. And that's really kind of what's brought me to where I am today. I could tell you I'm at peace with who I am and how I'm living my life. I would say my life right now is far from certain. There's a catchphrase word that gets thrown around our house quite often, and that word is stability. And, my wife asks quite often, not in a bad way, but she's like, when do we get back to stable? And I said, I really don't know, but I can tell you where our foundation is rooted. And I think we're as stable as we've ever been, even though our bank account would tell you differently. That's a little bit of a teaser of me and where I've been and kind of what's going on in my life right now.
I love that. In particular, you've launched in your own world of podcasts, the Inward 9. And I did get that right? The Inward 9?
The Inward 9.
Perfect. And I rocked episode 0 today to get a little bit of a story about you. And I do challenge everyone out there to go check it out. Give us a little brief breakdown of what the Inward 9 is all about.
Well, first off, I think for you, the two of you and anybody else who's in the podcast space, my respect has already gone up just in trying to get a couple episodes out there. It's terrifying. I hope you guys feel the same way. If we can just be honest for a second.
Yep.
To press publish and know that this thing is going to go out and you can't really put the toothpaste back in the tube once it's gone. But Ryan and Danny, I think I've had a way of helping people as a golf professional for a lot of years. And that's something that didn't go away just because I'm not a golf professional anymore. I'm still very passionate about helping people become the best that they can be. And it felt like all roads were pointing towards getting in this space. Leading with my story, which you listened to today, but then also using the network that I've built over 20 years to bring people on this show, people that have had success. There are so many great people in the game of golf, as you guys know. It is endless, the amount of knowledge and inspiration that's out there. And I just saw an opportunity when I looked within the golf industry. I didn't see anything, there's 101 podcasts that I think will talk about professional golf. But I couldn't see too many that were talking about the golf professional or the superintendent or the person who's running tournaments, or a rules official, or a caddy at your local club, to just name a few of the positions. They're endless. I just want to kind of put us in the same space and be like, hey, let's all just kind of get in here and learn from each other a little bit. Let's acknowledge all these different jobs that are going on. Let's see each other. Let's appreciate each other. Let's understand each other. And that's really what I'm trying to do. I have an idea of how this is all going to start, the kind of guests that we're going to have on, but I've already been getting texts today saying like, hey, like, it's a pretty good start. Like, would you ever consider having this person or that person? I'm like, yeah. And that's what I'm looking to hear from, is like, for you, the listener, it really belongs to you. It doesn't belong to me. I'm going to kind of host it. But I think it's going to evolve as time goes along. So I'm curious to see where that goes.
Yeah. You nailed the part around you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. We had a mentor of ours, one of our pastors at our church, who really helped us kind of even formulate some of the work that we're trying to figure out logistically with this podcast and in any podcast. And his best advice, Danny and I agree, was just hit record. You have to do that first, right? That's first step to do anything, is hitting record. And in those, we have had a chance to talk to people, connect with people, and hear stories around, man, golf's great, but restoration and healing and growth are even way better than anything else that goes in that. So you've had a journey around golf, of course. Give the listener a little bit of, in your professional side, in the pro days, what clubs were you at? Where was that route for you in that side?
Yeah. I was kind of sharing on my own is just, I kind of had an accidental introduction to golf at the age of 14. I went to a PGA Tour event, was inspired by what I saw, came home, wanted to learn how to do it. And that road pointed towards being a caddy at Somerset Hills in Burnsville, New Jersey, which will forever and always be my favorite club in America. It's what shaped me in my love for the game and how I learned how to play the game, learned how to share the game with people as a caddy. Interned for a few summers at Canoeburg Country Club, which is nearby Summit, New Jersey. Graduated college, didn't really want to grow up. I had a cup of coffee in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Got laid off. Listened to a tape series on the life of Joseph during that point in my life. Cassette tape series, right? Do you guys remember that? Like the things with the wheels.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the wax.
Let's go, brother.
We got
Somebody gave me a cassette tape series. It was called From Dream to Destiny. It was a preacher out of Cleveland named Robert Morris, off the top of my head. But it was such a formative time in my life where I wasn't so committed to golf that I couldn't walk away from it. And I was like, all right, God's just pulling me into ministry. So I thought I was going to work in golf. He had other ideas. And that's that I had accepted Christ at age 18 at an FCA camp in Pine Needles. And but I hadn't really surrendered the plan. I think I still was kind of holding on to the wheel a little bit as far as the decision of where my life was going to go. And I think you listen to that cassette tape series and you listen to the life of Joseph, who was somebody who had a lot of pride about his dreams, got thrown in a pit, sold as a slave by his brothers, wrongly imprisoned, stayed in prison longer than he should have, gets a chance. Pharaoh trusts him and he ends up, lording over Egypt. And then, of course, the full circle comes where he has to forgive his family and his brothers. There's healing in that, restoration, if you will, right? I think that was the time in my life where it's like I was at peace with whatever was going to happen and wherever door was going to open or close. And the call came that kept me in golf. I went back to New Jersey, was at Canoeburg, and within a year of being laid off, all of a sudden found myself spending winters at Seminole Golf Club in Juno Beach with Bob Ford, who's one of the best in the business. Did a couple winters down there, back and forth. He lived like a gypsy and a nomad for a couple of years, 6 months here and 6 months there. And I was 28 when they kind of pushed me out of the nest at Seminole, and I started interviewing for head jobs. As that was going on, somebody who's an identical twin brother to somebody that I'd worked with called me up and said, hey, the pro at Marion's looking for a first assistant. And it was a great fit for me at the time. I wasn't ready to be a head pro. I knew that. And Marion was fantastic. You don't get an opportunity like that every day to go to a place like that. So I went there, and I think the rubber kind of met the road, guys, when the pro offered me the job, looked me in the eye, and he said, look, I need 3 years from you. You're going to have opportunities to leave here after 1 or 2 years, but we have the Walker Cup in 2009, and you need to stay here. And I looked him in the eye, shook his hand. I said, you got it. And at the end of my first year, the pro at Canoebrook, where I'd spent collectively together 6 years, had left and moved on to another job. And they called me right away and they said, look, you're very popular here. Would you come interview for this job? And now I'm 28 and I'm looking at making possibly 6 figures, the biggest job I could have dreamed of at the time. And, but I made a commitment to Scott. So what do? You just kind of say like, well, Scott will understand, right? It's a great opportunity. I didn't take the job interview. I passed on it, was introduced to my wife the next week. And you can't imagine life being different. I fulfilled that 3-year commitment to Marion. And I think my mindset then was, getting around the age of 30 or 31. All right, it's my time now. I've fulfilled my commitment. I feel ready and it's time to run. And all of a sudden, 3 years after that, I still hadn't landed my head job. And share a quick story with you and wrap it up, because if I talk this long, you only get to ask me 3 questions on this podcast.
You're right.
But you kind of see how, things ebb and flow. And you see God's hand in it looking back, but in the moment, you really don't. You kind of wonder what's going on. At the end of my 3rd year, when I was interviewing, I got really close for a really prominent club in the South. I could say it now. It's Charlotte Country Club. In spoiler alert, they didn't hire me. They did hire the right guy. They hired a great pro who's a good friend of mine. But when we got down to the final 2, they said, hey, when you come back for the finals, would you bring your wife? We would like to meet her. And I said, she'd love to come, but we're expecting the birth of our first child. So probably not going to happen. And went to my wife and I said, hey, they really want to meet you, but I told them you're probably out. And she said, do you think it'll make a difference? I said, it might. The other guys from down there, they know him pretty well. I think they're trying to get a feel if we're all in on this. And 1 week after a C-section delivery, she goes, I'm in. And we got in the car and we drove to Charlotte and spent a day with the committee, 1 week old in a car seat in the corner of the room. And we walked out of there that night and we looked at each other. We said, this is it. My childhood hero was Davis Love. He's the reason I got into golf. And Davis's dad was the pro there. And I was like, look at all the stars lining here. Man, like God's good. And we got in the car and started driving home. We stopped in Virginia, saw somebody, and we got up the next morning to finish the drive. And we got the call from the committee that they went with the other candidate. And it crushed us. We had mentally allowed ourselves to move on and get ahead of ourselves. But I think a couple things I learned from that trip was, one, I married the right person. She was up for the journey. She was on board for what my dreams and aspirations were. And the putt didn't fall, but I realized that I married a great person in that process. We got home to Marion that night and there was a dinner. It was a Young Life dinner. And that's an organization that I grew up in. We were introduced to each other through Young Life. These were the people that actually introduced us. And there was a dinner there that night. And we went back and I had to stand up at dinner and tell everyone, I said, look, putt didn't fall and I can't make sense of it, but we're going to continue to go forward and trust that God has a timing to all of this, and we'll understand it someday. And I went to the bar later that night. There was one of the guys in the group, a guy named Dave Urban, was standing at the bar with this big smile on his face. And I said, what are you so happy about? He goes, I'm smiling thinking about what either God was saving you from or preparing you for. And I said, saving me from? I said, didn't you hear me talk about how perfect that situation was? Like, that was it. That's the biggest thing I've gone for. I'm like, I don't know if it'll get that good again. And he goes, oh, it will. And, the next fall we landed at Hazeltine with a Ryder Cup 4 years on the horizon. Like, we couldn't have dreamt that big. And I'm not trying to say, look, everything's always going to work out like that. We know that now. But I think sometimes when like God's kind of like, don't put limits on what I can do through you. And I think that's just going back to the prayer at 24 is like, I've still like completely surrendered the plan. I had to give up that job 3 years ago. So you can't just put all your eggs in the identity basket of who you are and what you do.
Yeah.
Chandler, first, I love that you got saved at Pine Needles. Ryan and I had the opportunity to share around there earlier this year together. And I love that that's your memory there. Our memory is probably one too many golf swings from that round. But obviously, you've had some unbelievable stops, unbelievable rolls, but then also maybe frustration or disappointment in being let go or not attaining a role you thought was set up perfectly for you. But having that relationship with the Lord throughout those moments, can you describe, I guess, to some other listeners, whether they're working vocationally in the game or otherwise, where they probably experienced similar disappointments, similar frustrations, kind of seeking, what is the meaning behind all that? And I love that, your buddy said probably protecting you from something where you probably didn't see that in the moment. What does that kind of steadfast relationship look like through those moments for you, where, a lot of people could probably step back and look and say, look at all these places he's been. It's unbelievable the opportunities he's had. But obviously you've had those ups and downs, but there was kind of a static through point, if you will, that probably carried you through that.
Yeah, I think, doesn't the game of golf kind of prepare us for this journey, though? Like, if you play this game long enough, there's a analogy I love to make that sometimes when I make it, people look at me and go like, what are you talking about? And try it out sometimes on social media and you get some really funny responses. But what I'm hitting at is, Danny, you ever drive one right down the middle and you get out there and the
every
ball
once in a while, not often.
Okay. All right. Sorry, maybe I asked the wrong person, but every now and then when you hit the fairway, you ever, walk right down the middle and you find your ball in a divot in the fairway. And a lot of people go like, well, that's unfair. I should get relief from that. I hit it in the fairway. I did what the game asked me to do. And I understand that. But have you ever hit one, and maybe this is more often for you, maybe you ever hit one like 50 yards offline, hit it, should have gone out of bounds, hit a tree, and all of a sudden it's sitting up perfectly in the rough and you got a perfect angle at the green. Well, you didn't deserve that either. And in a nutshell, like that is God's grace for us, right? But I think it's like sometimes you have to be willing to accept the bad break that you didn't deserve, and that's life. And I think golf just prepares you for that. I also think you'd be really hard pressed to find people that just had like a straight upward ascent where they weren't challenged in any way. Like, I think I don't know if you really want that, because it's like, how has your character been refined, tested, and prepared for when those moments come? Those of us who are parents, I think being a parent is ultimately, it helps you understand how God sees us. I'm trying to wrap this up with like a quick analogy like this. There was a great book I was reading by a pastor up here in Minnesota. It was called Broken Escalators. It's like, when does that convenient escalator stop and you actually have to climb the steps yourself? And you're like, oh, I have to do the work. But Broken Escalators, he was talking about how I think he had like an 8-year-old son. They were packing up for this trip to Missouri. Maybe they're going to Branson or somewhere like that. But maybe they're going to the Ozarks, but they're going to some water park. And, the kid had his swim floaty on. They're getting in the car. And the dad is going, hey, bud, like, it's a long drive. You don't want that thing on, for the drive here. Just take that off. I know you're excited. He's like, no, I got it. And, of course, they get in the car and he's looking in the rearview mirror and you can see the kid getting fidgety and itchy. And he's like, yeah, it's a matter of time for, And, he's like, Dad, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Itchy. And, said, no, it's going to be a while. And finally, the kid's breaking down. He's losing all control. And he's breaking down crying. And finally just says to his dad, he goes, don't you love me? And I think, like, as parents, when we hear our kids say that, we're like, yeah, but like, I love you. I know this is going to be a long journey, but I also know where we're going. And I know how much fun you're going to have when we get there. I think that's one of the best analogies I've seen for the question that you've asked, Danny, is like, we don't know how long it's going to take to get there. I've been a part of, we can get into it. I mean, the last 3 years, I still have some ongoing that I don't know when we're going to cross the finish line. But I know, again, like, where my endurance and my hope comes from. And I think that's just what I'm trying to share with people is like, there's an inner peace and a joy that a lot of people kind of look at our life right now and be like, you gave up what? And you're going where? And like artwork. And I know it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but I think, we're trying to listen to our gut and the Holy Spirit work a little bit here and can understand it. Last thing I guess I would say with that, Danny, is like a pastor of our church, I think, also said it really well. He said, this journey that we're on, it's kind of like having a set of Legos and you have the book and it's telling you what piece to put in next, but you don't really know what you're building. And then all of a sudden, like you finish it, you step back, you're like, that's what I was building the whole time, this beautiful car or building and whatever it ended up being. It's like, we can't see it. But I think all we're being asked to do is just put the next Lego in piece and trust that the grand architect has got it figured out.
Ryan, I think we're gonna have to step up our one-line game of reference points. Chandler's just setting them up and knocking them down on us.
I mean, this is gonna be the easiest social clips I've ever done in my life. This is gonna be cakewalk to put this stuff out there. Chandler, it's man, it's such wisdom because we really do walk these things, and people, no matter what their career paths are, relationship lives, whatever goes on throughout life, there are valleys, and it's how you proceed through the valley that matters. And all throughout Scripture, by the way, and we all know this, God's math doesn't make sense. But in this sense, it does, right? And it plays out, and it says, this is a trust exercise. This is a commitment to it all. This is God shaking your hand saying, give me 3 years, right? This is another playback into even what happened earlier in your career a little bit, and just with that commitment level. And I'm honored to even hear your commitment to that, to say, we're going to keep walking this, putting one brick at a time. So that way we can at some point turn back and you'll look at it. And I think what'll be more beautiful, Chandler, and I hope you hear me when I say this, is that God looks at it and says, well done. And that's a thing to remember.
Yeah, that's right, boys.
Good.
Chandler, you already alluded to it, and obviously we'll continue to encourage people to go check out the Inward Nine to check the full story. But obviously you made a huge transition in the last few years from I guess your occupation in the game, if you will, and your expertise and experience, and made a hard shift, even though you stayed in the game. But would love for you to share what that journey has looked like since, and obviously would love for you to speak to some of the opportunities you've seen even through it.
Yeah, I think the decision that we made in the fall of 2021, if I didn't kind of set it up, I was the head golf professional at Hazeltine National from the end of 2012 to the end of 2021. And that was a great chapter of my life. I wouldn't take back anything. I loved being a golf professional. I think the harsh reality, not just for myself, but everyone in the industry, is when the sun is up, the golf pro's at work. And it's a sun up to sundown all summer and season long kind of job. That's been the expectation for decades. I'm not exempt. I knew that. I knew what I signed up for. I have no complaints about it. I just think I started looking at a couple things in our life and the life of our family. I think a lot of this started in 2018 for us, Danny. We had the delivery of our third child, Charlotte, and my wife experienced a pulmonary embolism. And I'd never heard those two words before. It's pretty severe. It's a blood clot in the lungs, and it's a widowmaker. And thankfully we caught it when we did. And I think that just kind of woke us up to the reality that I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. There's no guarantee in this. The next summer, we had the KPMG Women's PGA Championship at Hazeltine. And I'd read a book by former KPMG CEO, a guy named Eugene O'Kelly. And the book is called Chasing Daylight. Eugene O'Kelly was 55, jet setting around the world, art of the deal, and suddenly was diagnosed with brain cancer and given 4 months. Quits the job the next day and tries to unpack his life for 4 months. But the message that he had for all of us as the reader is, whatever you think you got, what do you think you got? 60, 70, 80? I think we all were like, yeah, we're going to at least hit 80, maybe 90. My wife's grandmother, just hit 100, right? It can happen. Eugene O'Kelly just kind of, his message to us was, move it up to 60. And now look at your life a little differently. And I looked at that last year. I was like, I'm 45 last year. In golf terms, I'm standing on the 15th tee and I've got 4 holes left to play. Like, let that sink home and think about your life that way, and like, see if that doesn't change your urgency. And I just kind of got to a place of peace. My family and I I'm proud of what I've accomplished as a golf professional, but if I continue on in that job and I turn around, I'll share with you guys what I think of, the reason I named the podcast The Inward Nine is I had seen a stat in the summer of 2021 on Instagram that just shook me. And it was a stat that said 75% of your time with your kids will be gone by the time that they're 12. 90% will be gone by the time that they're 18. I think we all kind of think like, yeah, they're going to go off to college, but we'll have them around. And like, it's not really the case. Like, once they go to college, like, you get 10% of that time maybe after, unless they come live in your basement for a while. But my oldest daughter was 10, and I was like, look, I've seen her a little bit for the front nine, but I've kind of missed it. I've got 9 holes left to make it count with this kid. So the inward nine is, it's not, I hate to say it's not about my listeners, it's about her. And it's about my opportunity to be a dad. You know, when you go play golf in Great Britain and Scotland and Ireland and the great clubs over there, you play the outward nine and you play the inward nine. And there's something about that decision that it just felt like I was turning around and coming home. So I think that's what a lot of this is born of is when I'm talking to listeners, I'm just as much talking to my daughters. If they listen to this 10, 20 years from now, I want whatever I'm sharing with our listeners to be applicable to them. So that's kind of what I'm up to.
That's amazing.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I know me as a father as well, Chandler, and I know Danny can echo these things. You just nailed it. Anymore, it's not so much around how many years, it's how many times you have left with the number of people you're around. I heard it was Jesse Eitzer was talking about his parents, if they live to be 80 and they're in their 70s now, he sees them once a year, so he'd only see him like 8 more times. And so that changed how he viewed it then. And the same story. If I'm 50 now, and honestly, my father passed away when he was 53. So if I operate in the mindset, and I've been operating this way, is that if I only have 3 more years left, and I am asking God for longer, I'm okay with that. But if I operate like I only have 3 left, then it can be more fulfilling, it can be more focused, more diligent, and I can accomplish way more, not for me, but for the number one, the glory of God, and number 2, so that the legacy left behind is stronger, so that way then my children can carry on the legacy, you know. So I honor what you've done, my friend.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to be clear. Like, I'm not trying to tell everyone to go out and quit their job tomorrow. Like, very much the opposite. Very much the opposite. It's, but what I do want people to do is just take some inventory. I've read a lot of books along these lines. There's a very powerful book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. It's written by an Australian caretaker who spends people's final moments with them. And I think you find out when people review their life, what do they regret? You know, regret number 2 was, I wish I hadn't worked so much. And I'm not trying to downplay accomplishments or what we contribute through our vocations and our jobs. Like, you know, the things that we're given to do are given to us by God for a reason. Like, it's a job for a reason. And he wants us to do it well and take pride in that and contribute to society through that. I think expectations is a word that you're going to hear me use quite a bit on my podcast. It's how can we temper the expectations and make sure that they're set in a way that we can be successful. And I think that's probably my biggest downfall in some of the things that I've gotten to be a part of is I was running so fast to just do the job that I never really stopped to ask, like, what are the expectations of me? And that's not to put a shady light on anyone that I've worked with. These are all great, fine people. And again, I'm no outlier in my job and what was expected of me. But I could have done a better job as far as just saying, like, look, here's what I'm capable of doing. And is that a fit for both sides? It has to be a win-win for both sides. So that was my decision. Again, I'm at peace with it. I'm not mad at anyone. But yeah, going forward, if you want me to talk about, I think, Dan, you asked about the last 3 years. I can try to qualify that for you if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great. And aside from just putting detail into, you know, what you're doing now and where the Lord is taking you and what he's doing, I would love to hear your perspective on what the feeling is like to you to stand at the American Home of Golf at Pinehurst during a U.S. Open and have a piece that Ryan already pointed to, where people are coming to experience that with you and see the work that you've created. What does that feel like to you?
Yeah, let me try and summarize that. So when I left Hazeltine, it wasn't with a plan. We didn't know where we were going. It was a complete jump into the unknown. I feel like we had to make that decision to leave, because if I had stayed in the job and kind of had one foot out thinking about, well, when the right opportunity comes along, I'll leave, I would have never left. It was just that we had to leave and have that push us. And, you know, my biggest fear was, like, I love the game of golf. I hope this isn't it for me. I want to be involved in the game in some way. But if this is it, then I'm at peace with it. And so we left, and I was kicking the tires on a few things. I had started drawing the artwork that you just referenced after my wife's pulmonary embolism in 2018. She asked me to stay close to home that winter. Understandably so. It spooked all of us. I think she shared with me later, it took her close to a year to just come to peace with it. If I keep taking blood thinners, then I'll wake up in the morning. I mean, just try to grasp that, right? So that winter, I stayed close to home. I wanted to be an architect as a kid. I got the drawing board out just to keep myself occupied. And, first project led to another one. And I'd had this vision. I was talking about the history of these championships all the time at Hazeltine. We'd had all of them, U.S. Opens and Ryder Cups and PGAs and U.S. Amateurs. And I just wanted to have something like Wikipedia on my wall, but I wanted it to be colorful enough that I could quick reference it. And that's where it started. I was drawing it for me. It was an audience of one. If it was anything good, I was going to put it on my wall when it was done. I finished